Hi there, and welcome to this edition of Assembly Calendar. I'm Visscher. Our guest today is New York State Assemblyman Jim Tedisco, who represents the 112th Assembly District of Schenectady and Saratoga County. Thank you very much for joining us today for this edition of Assembly Calendar. Always a pleasure for you to tune in, and we're going to sit down and chat with the Assemblyman over the next 15 minutes or so to discuss some of the latest happenings in state government. I know the Assemblyman has been in Albany today doing some important legislative business.
Yeah, we'll talk about that maybe a little later on. We were with the Standing Committee on Corrections, talking about the Dannemora and the escape, and we'll delve into that. But I think right now it's important to talk about what happened the other day in the courts with ex-Speaker Sheldon Silver, and take a look at the fact that we have 213 senators and assemblymen who represent our government and an executive, separate branches. Some of them are very bright. Some of them are very intelligent. Some of them seem to have some great ideas to help the quality of life. But if they're not honest and they're not going to live up to the oath of office we take, not to represent ourselves in any way, including financially, but to represent the constituents in our assembly or Senate districts, they've got to be removed. And when we backtrack a little bit and look at 2015, we're going to have 5 individuals who've been indicted, researched, convicted. 3 of them right now are incarcerated. 1 has house incarceration. And Speaker Silver, who was just convicted on 7 counts, including extortion and mail fraud and quid pro quo activity, theft of services of constituents, he'll probably spend many years in jail right now. And that's Senator Smith, Senator Sampson, Assemblyman Scarborough, and now we have, of course, ex-Speaker Silver and Senator Libous. 5 individuals from the New York State Legislature. If we don't do reform now, the question is, when is it appropriate to do reform now? And it is appropriate to do it right now. And look, we're not going to stop all this type of thing. If you have a person that's dishonest, they're going to find ways to involve themselves in fraud and bribery and misplacement of their efforts to take funding that belongs to the taxpayers of the New York, which we should covet and protect and utilize, not only not steal, but utilize in the best way to create a quality of life for them. Look, our simple obligation is to be there as a government, to remove obstacles for each and every one of the constituents we represent so they can be everything they can be with the God-given talents they've been given, then get out of their way. With the caveat that we know they're going to have individuals through no fault of their own, whether it's disability, aging, a problem with education or their environment, they're going to need our assistance for maybe an extended time, maybe for the rest of their life. We're a compassionate society. We understand we should be able to do that. In terms of how we can not eliminate it completely, but do a lot better job. Number 1, Speaker Silver has been here for 2 decades, 20 years, consolidated unbelievable powers. Not only the powers of the monies that are in the budget, $120 billion budget with all slush funds there, and he has access to those monies. And that's a part of what happened. He gave this monies, called them grants, and they got kickbacks by sending him individuals to the law firm, which he would get a per diem for the individuals he sent to the law firm. But he controls every single piece of legislation. And that's inappropriate. We need more involvement by rank and file elected officials who have great ideas and should be involved with that process. And I can give you an example where we had 148 sponsors, Jenna's Law. This was a nurse who got murdered and raped by a first-time violent felon. And this first-time violent felon got parole. Well, we eliminated with Jenna's Law. If you're a violent felon, you should not get parole right off the bat as a first-time violent felon. 149 sponsors on the bill. The bill never came to the floor for a vote because one man held it up. That's how much power the Speaker of the House has. So maybe the first reform we need is term limits for the Speaker. Maybe 2 terms or 3 terms, that would be 4 or 6 years, but not 20 years because you can consolidate so much power.
Right.
And when you have so much of that power, whether you're in the majority or in the minority, they know the impact that he could have on him. Your parking position, your district office, your office over here at the Capitol, your funding for your staffing, that could go like that, controlled by the Speaker. But most importantly, we have a piece of legislation besides term limits for leaders so they can't consolidate. We have a bill that says, look, if there's 76 sponsors on a piece of legislation, which is enough to pass it, 76 sponsors have signed on it. it would be mandated to come to the floor for a discussion, a debate, and at least a vote. Not pass automatically until it comes through the committee, but onto the floor. But right now, as I mentioned, you can have a 449, and if that one powerful speaker says no, it languishes in committee. That's inappropriate. So those two things, term limits, enough sponsorship on a bill to at least get it to the floor. So the rank and file members, if they can get those sponsorships, they can get an open vote on the floor. And then thirdly, and this is very much important, transparency. First of all, maybe we start out limiting outside income, and if we have to eliminate outside income, because I appreciate attorneys and lawyers, but in many instances, they make the law to interpret the law, kind of a conflict of interest. If you want to be an attorney, that's fine. But if you want to be a public servant, be a public servant. I don't think you can do both fully. So we want to minimize or eliminate outside income. That way you can't make a quid pro quo. Give me some money and I'll give you a grant. I'll slip you some money for research, which took place with a doctor with Sheldon Silver. So, and then in campaign donations, complete oversight and transparency. In other words, when did that person donate to an elected official? How much did that person donate? What kind of contracts or bidding are they doing? How much involvement is that senator and assemblyman involved with those contracts? Total transparency of your interactions. And reporting fully all your fundraising. We had individuals who hadn't reported for years what their donations were, what they were paying out. That's a complete conflict with the law in the transparency we need. So those things right there, I think, would have a profound impact. And we have to eliminate what I call bundling. There's a certain level of donations that individuals can provide for elected officials. But you remember Elliot Spitzer, he said, I'm going to limit mine to $2,000. Then he had a guy, when he did a fundraiser, go out, talk to about 300 of his friends, and got $300 $2,000 checks from his friends. He bundled that and said, here, Governor Elliot Spitzer. Now, is that undue influence or not? All those checks weren't signed by him, but that governor or that elected official knows that's the one who got 300 checks. That's called bundling. You shouldn't be able to do that. Maybe you can have a party, invite people to a party, but you shouldn't go out and get their checks and bundle it and give it to somebody. That's undue influencing what takes place. So there are a whole series of things we can do. And
I don't think you touched on pension forfeiture.
That's one of them also. They should know they have something to lose. We have a bill, which I'm a sponsor of. Right now, believe it or not, Sheldon Silver is going to get $87 of taxpayers' money a year. He's going to continue to get his pension. When he didn't live up to his oath of office, cheated the people, defrauded the people, took their money, which could be used for our educational system, health care, the EPIC program for senior citizen pharmaceutical, roadways and bridges, stole $4 to $5 million over the course of those years. So you've got to say enough is enough. Right now, not retroactively, but from a point on when we passed it, you can take the pension. But anybody serving, I think, if they don't live up to their oath of office, they have a felony, and he has to leave because he's got a felony. If you get a felony, you should have to give up your pension. And that's a part of the reform. So those collectively, I think, would have a profound impact. Now, would it solve all the problems? No. Once again, they're going to find some ways, but it would certainly limit those problems. When you have more transparency, more sunshine, I think you have a better chance of limiting this type of fraud and corruption and deception.
Jim, you've been down here a long time. I mean, is this the worst you've ever seen it in terms of corruption?
I think it's got to be the worst. But having said that, they paint the whole system with a broad brush. And of the 5 individuals I've mentioned, 4 are from New York City, downstate. I think it's more of a downstate problem than an upstate problem. And I think there's a lot of good legislators. I think the majority of them know what's right, do what's right, are concerned about serving their constituents and creating a better quality of life. But, you know, Sheldon Silver, it's funny with him. You know, for a long period of time, I was one of his nemesis. I stood up, I checked him, I got in his face on taxes and on spending and forced him to do a property tax cap and address the highest property taxes in the state. But really, he should have resigned because I classify him as the Dr. Kevorkian of public servants. He's personally assisted over the suicide and murder of our economy. We're number 1 in the worst environment for job creation and for small business. We're number 2. I think Connecticut and New Jersey are tied for first in Tax Freedom Day, when you've paid all your taxes and you finally take $1 home. And in every indicator, we're at the bottom of those good things that every other state, 49 states, or 47 or 48, are ahead of us in. And yes, he has to leave now because we caught him stealing from the public. But he was destroying the public's best interest just by the policies he put forth. And that's why I think, and here's the one thing I didn't mention, which we have to, recall is so important right now. Allow the public, and I have the piece of legislation. You know, my mother always told me, she brought me into this world, and she said, Jimmy, you keep messing around. I used to keep trying to touch the ceiling to do my jumping for basketball. She said, I'll take you out of this world. She was kidding, of course. But truly, they gave us the honor to take us into this public service realm to represent them. If they feel that we haven't served them fully, we haven't lived up to our oath of office, why should we have to go to court like this and spend millions of taxpayers' dollars in court? Why can't they have recall? 20 other states have recall. Recall that legislator and say, you're out of here. Bang, I'm the umpire. I put you there. I don't want you there anymore. There's a process we've put in place legislatively to do that. If a state ever needed recall, it's the state of New York.
Well, with a few minutes left, there was a hearing going on in Albany this week having to do with the State Corrections Committee. Yeah. And they're basically picking apart and examining in detail the escape of those two prisoners.
The Dannemora duo.
The Dannemora duo.
And
you attended that hearing.
Yeah, Matt and Sweat, Richard Matt and David Sweat. This is half of the testimony. I'm going to shoot back now after I talk to you. But I grilled some of the people there, and I asked them some very simple questions, because the problem with this is, well, number one, they base privileges they give to individual inmates to provide for good behavior incentive, and that's not a bad idea. But they base them on how good they behave in prison. Matt and Sweat were very smart guys. They were murderers. They were worst of the worst. But they knew if they behaved, they'd get onto the honor block, because it's only how you behave in prison right now is the category on how you get privileges, not the vicious crimes you've committed. And my point is, through the prisoner's privilege limitation law, which I put in place, and I got sponsors in the Senate, several sponsors in the Assembly, there's got to be limitations for the worst of the worst. There's got to be limitations for all of them, even those who didn't have violent crimes. They agreed with that today. And what I said, these people were not honorable. Matt murdered his boss and then dismembered him. Mm-hmm. Sweat ran over a law enforcement official, but not once went back and forth to make sure he was destroyed and killed. And these guys are on the honor block. They're getting civilian clothes. They're interacting with Joyce Mitchell, who was a seamstress, a civilian who was not trained, in isolated ways. They had intimate contact with her. They were alone with her. They were in a closet with her. And she was able to give them the tools to help them. And along with civilian clothes they got by being on the honor block, were able to escape and utilize those tools. How
do we prevent this from happening again?
Well,
is the question.
Three things. You evaluate these people who are the worst of the worst, and you limit their privileges. They're not on honor blocks. They don't get civilian clothes, and they don't interact in an isolated way without being overseen by a corrections official, a corrections officer, a corrections guard. Got to be there if this is an outside individual civilian who can be psychologically controlled, which Joyce Mitchell unfortunately was. She's incarcerated now, and rightfully so. And we want to increase the penalties for these individuals, whether they're civilians or professionals who help with an escape. It was a $20 million cost, and it ravaged the emotional and psychological well-being of Clinton, Franklin, and in those upstate areas where Dannemora is. So this bill is very important. I asked them questions about that, and hopefully they took it to heart and they took the bill to heart. And if we can get that passed, it's going to be safer prison. It's going to be less difficult to run, and it's going to be safer for not only the corrections officers, but the inmates.
Good enough, Jim. Nice to see you.
My
if you'd like to reach out to Jim Tedisco, you can do so by contacting him in his district office at 636 Plank Road. That's Suite 101, Clifton Park, 12065. You can call him at 370-2812 or tediscoj@assembly.state.ny.us. The Assemblyman is also on Facebook. Reach out to him there as well. Thank you very much for joining us for this edition of Assembly Calendar. Until next time, I'm Visscher.